I'd always felt a magnetic pull towards the rugged beauty of southern Utah. Its wild, untouched landscape seemed to whisper of ancient secrets and hidden wonders. As an avid hiker, the idea of spending a day exploring its canyons and mesas filled me with a deep sense of anticipation. That morning, under a sky scrubbed clean by the desert wind, I set off with a sense of adventure that felt as vast as the horizon itself. Before hitting the trails, I stopped at a small grocery store on the outskirts of a sleepy town, the kind of place where the wooden floors creaked with every step and the shelves were stocked with essentials, dust from the desert settling on them like a soft blanket. I grabbed some packaged food and water, enough to sustain me through the day's trek. As the cashier rang up the supplies on the counter, the door chimed, and an older Native American man entered, nodding to me in greeting. The man had a weathered face, deep lines etched around his eyes like ancient petroglyphs. His eyes, dark and penetrating, seemed to carry stories I could only imagine. He struck up a conversation, his voice as rugged as the land he called home. We chatted about the weather, the relentless sun, and then about my plans for the day. When I mentioned my hiking destination, his demeanor changed. The friendly twinkle in his eyes vanished, replaced by a shadow that seemed to cloud his entire being. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. "That place you speak of," he began, his tone heavy with seriousness. "It's not wise to wander there. Not today. Not ever." A chill ran down my spine, despite the warmth of the morning sun filtering through the dusty windows of the store. "Why? What's wrong with that area?" I asked, curiosity tinged with a growing unease. The man glanced around the store as if to make sure we were alone, then looked back at me. His face was grave, and his voice trembled slightly as he spoke. "The land there, it holds memories. Bad memories. Spirits that have not found rest. Anger that has not settled. People have gone into those canyons, young and strong, but didn't come back the same. Some didn't come back at all." His words hung in the air like a warning bell, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. "Are you talking about accidents? People getting lost?" I pressed, trying to rationalize his warning. He shook his head slowly, his eyes piercing mine with an intensity that made my heart skip a beat. "Not just lost. Taken. The air, the rocks, they seem to change. There's a presence there, a watching, waiting presence. It plays tricks on you, makes you see and hear things you shouldn't. It lures you deeper, away from the paths, away from safety. And once it has you, it doesn't like to let go." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly very dry. The excitement of my planned hike was evaporating like morning mist under the desert sun. The earnestness in his voice, the sheer terror I saw flickering in his eyes, it was unnerving. "Do yourself a favor," he continued, his voice softening. "Find somewhere else to explore. There's plenty of beauty in the land that doesn't come with a heavy price." The way he said it, the finality in his tone, it gave me goosebumps. There was something in his eyes that I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just fear, it was a pleading, a deep, soulful plea for caution, maybe even for preservation. I thanked him, a knot forming in my stomach. As I left the store, his words echoed in my mind, mingling with the sound of the wind that swept across the open desert. The hike I had planned suddenly seemed foolhardy, a needless flirtation with unseen dangers whispered in lore, and now by this local elder. I drove away from the trailhead, my thoughts a whirlwind of skepticism and superstition. Yet the gravity of the man's demeanor anchored them all. I decided then to heed his advice, choosing instead to visit a well-known state park. It was touristy, tame compared to what I had intended, but the beauty was undeniable and, most importantly, safe. As I walked the benign trails, taking in the amazing vistas and the vibrant hues of the rocks, I couldn't shake off the encounter. The man's warning replayed in my head, each step I took affirming my decision to avoid the place he had so ominously described. There was a world of difference between the everyday dangers of hiking and the palpable dread he had imparted about that specific place. By the end of the day, as I watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of fire and gold, I felt a profound relief mixed with a residual curiosity. What had he seen or experienced to instill such fear? I was content not to find out, grateful for the uneventful peace of my day, and respectful of the mysteries and the warnings that protected them. As I headed back to my car, the echoes of the desert seemed to whisper secrets carried away by the wind, secrets I was now more than willing to leave undiscovered. The earnest behavior of the elder at the store, his words heavy with an ominous lore, had changed the course of my day, and perhaps more. As I settled into the driver's seat of my car, the comforting familiarity of the dashboard greeted me like an old friend. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine hummed to life, cutting through the silence of the fading day. The radio, which I had left tuned to a local station, began to broadcast the evening news. My hand paused on the volume dial, my breath catching as the reporter announced a chilling development. A group of hikers, missing for the past 3 days in the remote wilderness of southern Utah, was found late this afternoon. The voice on the radio informed its listeners. The area mentioned was the exact location I had initially planned to explore today. The reporter continued. The hikers, visibly distressed and unable to fully explain what they experienced, were immediately taken to receive medical attention. Unfortunately, one member of their party is still missing. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I leaned back against the headrest, my mind racing. The gravity of the elder's warning pressed upon me with renewed intensity. It was a stark realization of how narrowly I had escaped a potentially harrowing fate. As I drove away, the desert around me seemed to hold its breath, the secrets of its vast expanses heavier in the gathering dusk. The elder's words echoed in my mind, a solemn reminder of the unseen dangers that lurk in beautiful wild places.